Hello Sharks, I am Jonathan Little here today with another hand from the $10,000 buy-in GG Millions that takes place every week on GG Poker. Today we have a hand featuring a very splashy, creative, aggressive player who I've played a decent amount with, Carlos Villamarin. Sorry if I'm messing up your name. He is a regular in the high stakes games on GG, also high stakes tournaments around the world, and he gets in there and battles his opponent, someone who I do not know. This is not this player's real name, Judd Trump. I don't know much about this player, but also good high stakes regular. The payouts are the standard kind of flat payouts that GG features, especially in this tournament. So let's get right to the action. Folds around to Judd Trump. We are playing roughly 18 big blinds deep. Notice Carlos here is 18 big blinds deep. These other two players are middle stacked. Adrian, world-class player, sitting here also with about 20 big blinds. Jay Anderson, who, spoiler alert, after this tournament became the person with the most cashes in this GG Super Million. He's sitting here also with a big stack of about 35 big blinds. Folds around to Judd Trump with King Jack offsuit. I think you can go either way between really whatever you want. You can limp, you can raise, you can shove, depending on how you think Carlos is going to respond. I think I would probably go for the limp shove in this scenario. If you limp and Carlos raises, fine, you can rip it all in. If you limp and he jams, that'd be a pretty tricky spot, but I would not expect him to shove all that often for 18 big blinds. If you limp and he checks, it's fine, you see a flop. You could also just raise. If you raise and he shoves, it's a pretty nasty scenario, which you'd probably rather sidestep. You can't really fold, I don't think. You could also just rip it all in, but I think that'd be quite big. So really, you can go any direction here with this King Jack offsuit. Let's take a look. Judd does go for the limp. And with the absolute worst hands in position, you may say, just check and see the flop. But I actually don't hate bluffing here every once in a while. You want to make sure that when you are in position in the big blind against a small blind limp, that you raise with your best hands that you just want to play a big pot with, and then also some really trashy hands. That's going to put your opponent in a pretty nasty scenario. You may say, with only 18 big blinds, can you get away with that? I think you can. And like I said, Carlos is loose, splashy, aggressive. I have to imagine he's going to get after it here more often than not with a 3.2 big blind raise. Then, of course, if he gets re-raised, he can just fold. Carlos goes really small, though. 2.5 big blinds, 2.6 big blinds, whatever it is. I probably would have gone just a little bit bigger to try to get maximum fold equity. Because whenever you go this size, you have to imagine you're going to get called a ton, and you really don't want to get called when, even in position with the 7-3 offsuit. It is just not a good hand. So over to Judd. This is a spot where now I would just rip it all in. I'm trying to think if there's ever a world where I don't shove it all in. And I can't think of one. Whenever you call, you're just going to get a lot of bad flops. Like, well, this one. And unless you get a king, a jack, or a decent draw that you can then reasonably check shove all in on the flop, you're going to have a pretty tough time playing this scenario. So I think you'd rather just shove it all in pre-flop. If he calls, yeah, it's unfortunate, but usually he's not going to call. Okay, flop comes. 10, 6, 5, giving Carlos a gut shot. Judd overcards with a backdoor flush draw. Judd checks, as I have to imagine he's going to do with this entire range in this scenario. And typically in this spot, in Carlos's shoes, you usually either want to be betting with, you want to be betting with either a strong hand you're happy getting all your money in with, a premium draw, like a flush draw, open-ended straight draw that you're happy getting the money in with, or a really bad draw, like perhaps this gut shot, or maybe a hand like Jack 8, right? Something that's like a junky backdoor draw. And I think it's fine to go ahead and bet the 7-3. If you bet the 7-3 and get shoved or raised, it's pretty unfortunate. You have to fold to a shove, but I think it's fine. This is perhaps a spot you can just continuation bet with everything. It's tough because I don't really know Judd's range in this scenario. If Judd's range is going to be just like mostly middle connected hands that did not want to shove pre-flop, then you have to be way more cautious on this board because he's going to have a whole lot of hands like Jack 10 or 10-9 or 8-7 or 7-6, right? All these hands connect very well with this board. So if you expect to get played back at a lot in Carlos's shoes, you should be inclined to just check it back because you don't really want to get check raised here. I mean, a gut shot with perhaps a 7 or a 3 being good is not a hand you really want to get blown off of. But I think betting is also fine, especially if you think Judd's going to fold out a hand like Jack 9 or even, well, King Jack, right? So let's see what Carlos does. I actually sped this up a bit because the players played this hand incredibly slowly. Carlos goes for a tiny bet. 1.5 big blinds into the, 6 big blind pot. Oh boy. So look, I think Judd was probably planning to just fold against a medium or big bet, but against this tiny bet, I think folding is out of the question. But how do you continue? What I want you to do is I want you to take a second and think about what you would do with this king jack out of position facing this small bet. Now, obviously, YouTube commenters, we do not know that Carlos has a 7-3. Carlos could also have the aces or the ace 10 or the pocket 10s, right? So don't forget that. In this scenario, what would you do with the king jack? Would you fold, just thinking, well, what can you do? We're out of position. Would you call, just trying to spike a king or a jack? Or would you put in a raise? And if you put in a raise, would you put in a small raise to like 1.7 million? Or would you rip it all in? I want you to pause the video and write what you would do in the comment section below. All right. This is a nasty one. I think folding is out of the question, like I previously mentioned, just because we are getting pretty good odds. We could easily have the best hand. And even though we are going to get blown off of our equity sometimes, if we do call, I think it is still worth it to just continue. So we're going to call or raise. Question is, should we, call or raise? And I think the play here is to either call or raise small. If we raise big, like all in, what's going to happen is Carlos is going to continue with all of his good hands. And like I said, Carlos should be very polarized here to either really good pre-flop hands, many of which are a pair that is not going to fold, or total garbage. And the neat thing about the total garbage here is it's actually usually drawing pretty thin. Carlos is lucky to have a gut shot. Some of the total garbage is going to be stuff like 9-2 or 9-3 or 8-3 that's drawing really, really thin here. And, drawing thin. It's just not good, right? It's a hand that's going to have a difficult time sticking around. So I think the play... I don't know. You let me know what you wanted to do in the comments. I would probably call, but I could get behind a small raise as well. I think either option is acceptable. That said, Carlos does get frisky every once in a while and splashes around pretty hard. So Judd's going to give it some thought. Like I said, they thought for forever in this hand, so I fast-forwarded it a little bit. So you may see them time banking, then suddenly losing a lot of their time bank. On GG, they give the players plenty of time to make decisions, which I think is good. When you're playing for lots of money, you should have plenty of time to make your decision. May have to fast-forward through the fast-forwarded version of this video. Are you all having a great week? Hope you're having a great week. If you are, do me a favor, click like, click subscribe, click the notification bell. There we go. Judd Trump finally does put in the raise to 1.9 million. He has to go for the small raise. I think you can even go smaller because this is a scenario where if we do jam, or if we get jammed on, we have an easy fold with the king jack, right? So you just want to save as much money as possible. And you don't really care if Carlos folds out his random ace high / unpaired hands to, that's fine, right? If he does call, you also may have some triple barrel opportunities. You may say even shallow stack, can we triple barrel it? I think there are times where you could do that. The nice thing about going even smaller, perhaps like 1.6 million, 1.7 million, is that you'll be able to more reasonably triple barrel. The problem with this size is that the pot's going to grow to 6 million and Carlos is going to have about, 6 million behind, right? If he does call, maybe even less. And that may only let you have one more bet due to the relatively shallow stack to pot ratio. Whereas if you go just a little bit smaller, you can then go for something like a 25% turn bet and then a shove on the river that's reasonable. So I think I'd go just a little bit smaller. Back over to Carlos. This is unfortunate. At this point, he has to call 1.3 million to try to win 6. So you don't want to be in this scenario and just think, oh, I got raised, I got to get out of here. You always want to ask, what am I being offered? So in this scenario, he needs to realize, 15% equity, 18% equity, something like that. He knows he has 4 outs that are almost certainly good. I mean, of course, the club is not great, but if he gets the 4 of clubs, that's fine. So he knows 9-ish% of the time, he just basically has the nuts going to the turn. If he gets a 7 or a 3, that's also pretty good on the turn. So he has perhaps 6 additional outs. Not a great scenario, but I mean, if he has 10 outs here, you certainly cannot fold because we're getting a roughly break-even price to try to draw. The problem is that we don't know if the 3 or the 7 are good, right? Nasty spot. This is a dicey one. Every time I play a hand with Carlos or watch Carlos play a hand, he seems to be in a dicey scenario every time. I mean, look, I'd probably just fold here because I realize sometimes the clubs are just dead, and sometimes the 7's dead and the 3's dead. So even though we have 10 outs, we don't know if many of them are actually live. So I think it's probably just a fold here. That said, I don't know anything about Judd Trump. Maybe he's insane. Maybe he's tight. I don't know. If he's insane, then I'm way more inclined to get after it here. That said, should you shove? I don't think so. Because whenever Judd has a good pair or a draw, he's always going to call, and 7-3 is basically dead against that. And if he folds, well, he's only going to fold out just total bluffs like, well, this exact hand. But of course, remember, you two commenters, we do not know what the opponents have when we're playing. All right, over to Carlos. What's he going to do? Nasty scenario. Nasty scenario. I think if Judd went a little bit smaller, you should probably call. But I think against this size, even if he is very loose, aggressive, active, it's probably just a fold. If we were a little bit deeper stacked, like 15 million with Judd, I think calling becomes more reasonable. Carlos does call, though. Turns to 3. Well, here we have it. One of our 10 outs, right? Does Judd triple here? I mean, like, sure, right? Why not? The problem is, again, Carlos is very shallow. It'd be way nicer if he had something like 6 or 7 million in his stack. That way we could go something like 25% pot and then jam. I guess that's still the play. You have to be careful just shoving right here on the turn, because if you do shove it all in, what's going to happen is Carlos is going to call with all good draws, many of which you lose to a king jack, and all made hands. Whereas if you bet small, sometimes in that scenario, he's going to call with draws and then fold them out to a river barrel. You may say, do we really just want to be bluffing it off here? Look, if we check raise this flop and get a turn that completes some draws that probably doesn't connect with Carlos very well at all, I don't hate it. And I do think the play is to go small. Of course, if you go small and Carlos shoves, you have to fold. He goes 2 million. I'd probably go even just like a tiny bit smaller to give myself maximum river fold equity and to save as much money as possible whenever Carlos does shove the turn. But, yeah, sure. Creative battling play. I want you all to think about this. Would any of you out here watching this have played this hand this way so far? I don't know if I would have. This is a fun one. Over to Carlos. I mean, you certainly can't fold here. Whenever you turn a pair, you can't fold. The problem is that, again, we have to ask, are we continuing in the spot, assuming we just have a drawing hand, right? Like, are we drawing to a 7, a 3, or a 4? And I don't know. The tough thing is that when Judd does check the river, quite often it's going to be with the 10 to check call, or maybe a hand like ace 6 that's going to check call that, clearly is not good for 7-3. And whenever Judd bets the river, whenever the 7-3 misses, obviously, I think it's probably a reasonable fold. That said, maybe Carlos is just squarely putting Judd on a lot of bluffs, or a hand like 9-8, 8-7, etc. I don't know what's going on here. Help me make sense of it in the comments. I mean, I wouldn't fold here. The question is, do you shove or do you call? Carlos likes to call. The nice thing about shoving here is that you always realize your equity. The problem with shoving here is that whenever you shove and get called, it's terrible, right? But if you can ever get Judd off of a gut shot straight draw with 2 overcards, like 9-8, it's a great success. If you can get him off of a random king jack, it's a great success. Because now, I mean, give Judd this king jack on the river, he's gonna bluff. This is like a pretty clear bluffing card because 8-7 gets there, clubs gets there, all the draws get there, right? And notice here that Carlos only has about 33% pot remaining. Normally, you're not trying to bluff your opponent out whenever they only have 33% pot remaining, but I think, what else can you do? This seems like a spot where you have to go for it. You may say, would Carlos ever fold here? I mean, with this hand, he'll certainly fold. Even if he has a hand like ace 5 or 6-5 or 7-6 or 5-4, stuff like that, all of those hands will strongly consider folding. Now, he may not have those in his pre-flop range. Who knows? A lot of unknowns in this hand. A lot of unknowns. Whenever I play with Carlos, there's a lot of unknowns. You never really know what's going on because he gets in there and battles hard, like I said, and it makes it tough. That said, I think in this scenario, Judd just has to shove, and I think Carlos has to fold. It's a terrible river for him. He blocks. Well, I guess blockers aren't even all that relevant here. I was going to say he blocks like 8-7, so maybe that's a reason to call, but he also doesn't block flushes, so it's kind of negligible. Anyway, rip it in, Judd. Let's go. I love the all-in. Very rarely you're trying to get your opponent to fold for a third pot bet, but if there's ever a spot to do it, I think this is it. Wild final table hand, right? These players are playing for hundreds of thousands of dollars. And they are not afraid. Judd giving us some thought. Lots and lots of thought. Knows he's burned about a minute and change off this time bank so far. He does elect to rip it in. Over to Carlos. You got a pair. One of those 10 outs. Wouldn't this have played so much better if Carlos jammed the turn? I think that's probably just the play. It's unfortunate, but you protect against all the draws, and there's a lot of draws available on the turn. Anyway, I think now you got to fold, and that is what Carlos does. So yeah, let's go back to the turn here. I think this is sort of the pivotal moment in this hand where Judd goes for the bet. And I think the play for Carlos, when we are this incredibly shallow, is to just shove it all in here. Yeah, you always get called by a 10, but if you're against a flush draw, you're ahead. If you're against a straight draw, you're ahead. You may, in some world, even get a hand like 8-5 that randomly decided to play this way to fold. Or a hand like, 8-6 or 9-6 that somehow decided to play this way to fold. I don't think it's going to happen all that often, but you never know, right? So I think that's probably the play. And the great thing about that is that you realize your equity every time. Obviously, you're not trying to get it all in this scenario when we are playing at the final table for all the money with what's essentially a junkie made hand and a junkie draw. But the problem with this hand, this really illustrates the problem with calling, is that whenever you do call and really like any river comes, it's not great and your opponent shoves, I think you got to fold. And well, this one didn't work out well because Carlos ended up folding. Carlos ended up folding. That's me today. Hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, like I said, click like, click subscribe. Also click the notification bell. We have lots and lots of fun content here for you at youtube.com/pokercoaching. Good luck in your games. Have a great, great week. And I'll talk to you next time. Hello there. Yeah, I'm talking to you. You want me to let you in on one little secret to take your poker skills to the next level? All you have to do is click the subscribe button right here. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah.
Very nice.